Well, hello there, everybody. My name is Tony Grillo. Welcome to my channel, Wisconsin Hugs. And yesterday I told you a story uh, about that was told to me from a detective with the Minneapolis Police Department. And this fellow's name was Don Heitlin. And so I thought, he told me the story a long, long time ago. And I mean, we're talking when he told me the story, it was probably around 1990 or 1991. Well, maybe, yeah, 1992 maybe. And now we're talking almost 30 years ago. He told me that story. So I tried to find some information about this. The story. What exactly was he talking about when he told me this story? Because at the time I had moved out of state, so I wasn't familiar with the people's names. I was going to college at UW-Eau Claire in Wisconsin, and so I was not living in Minneapolis, and I kind of fell out of touch with all the news that was going on during that time period. And then Don, I had met Don after I'd gotten out of college, and so I wanted to see if I could find any information of Don as being with the Minneapolis Police Department. And I found this story right here, this picture, this article. This here is a picture of Don and another gentleman. Don would have been the guy on the driver's side. That is Don Heitlin, as he was a little bit younger looking back then, but that would have been Don right there. And apparently the story is the origins of the MPD K9 unit, because I told you all that he was a K9 cop for a while there. And here we go. So the MPD began testing use of dogs and policing sometime before 1970. And then where he had sent two officers basically to Washington, D.C., where they trained with two German Shepherds. The officers returned to Minneapolis with their dogs and were successful in gaining city support for a canine program. Okay? And then they recruited 8 officers from the MPD and dogs from private sector breeds for the first canine class. And then here we go. We've got basically they list all the officers that were involved in that. And here we go. This one right here. Here is a photograph of the late Lieutenant Mike Fisher, then commander of the MPD K9 unit, and Officer Don Heitlin, taken in the late 1970s. Note the emergency telephone number on the back of the squad car. This was taken before the advent of 911. So this is all I can find right now of Don Heitlin. I forgot to mention he had sideburns. I did say he looked like a rugged, handsome Clint Eastwood, and that he definitely did. And he was a tall man, tough-looking man. And yeah, that would be him right there. Wore cowboy boots all the time. Now, the closest story I could find that resembled the story that I had told you all yesterday, it seems to involve around this guy, John C. Chenoweth, who was a legislator in Minnesota, and this would have been what he looked like back then. This is another picture of him. And yeah, I found one more of him. Finding more pictures of him than Don Heitlin, but I guess if you're a state senator, that's going to be the case. And here's a picture of John with some Minnesota politicians. So let's read a little bit about him. I don't know if this is the guy that my friend Don Heitland, well, I can't really say friends, we just had an acquaintance, co-worker. I like to think that, we got close during the time that he taught me how to drive a semi-truck, but we were really only together about 2 weeks. And he had told me all these stories, and of course that was over 30 years ago, so I'm still hoping to remember if I got it all right from what he told me. But this, so I have no idea if this is what he's talking about or not, but this is the closest that I could find to the murder at Loring Park of a state senator. John Craig Chenoweth, from May 4th, he was born 1943, died August 10th, 1991. Yeah, this seems pretty familiar because I graduated high school in 1987, and then I just graduated college in 1991. And so this is a couple months after I graduated, and then I was working for that tire place from 91, 92, and that's when I met Don Heitland. Don Heitland was working for that same operation that I was working with, and I was told that he had been a detective with the Minneapolis Police Department, and now he's a truck driver with us. So anyways, so his death was in 1991, so Don would have just started working for our company after he had quit the police department. So anyways, John Chenoweth was a Minnesota politician. He was executive director of the Minneapolis Municipal Employees Retirement Fund and a victim of an anti-gay hate crime. Yeah, that's what everybody has been calling this, and I don't know if it is or if it isn't. According to Don, when he told me the story, there's more to the story than just being an anti-gay hate crime. But that's what he told me, and anything that I tell you, if we were in a court of law, would all be hearsay, and it wouldn't be allowed. So, what do I know, right? I'm just a truck driver to myself. As a member of the Minnesota Democratic Farm Labor Party, served in the House for Minnesota and the Senate. Okay, so let's look at his death. All right, he was murdered by gunshot on the beach. It was a gay hangout area at the time in Minneapolis on August 10th, 1991. 19-year-old Cord Dressette was also seriously wounded in the same shooting. Now, this Cord Dressette, apparently he was the kid that was from Coon Rapids, Minnesota. Okay, and he was from my hometown. So, Cord, I did not know Cord, even though we lived in the same town. I did not know Cord. I would have been 21 years old when he had been shot at 19. I did not know him. So Cord was also shot in the same shooting. All right. The murderer, J. Thomas Johnson, who was also gay, had shot and killed another gay man in Loring Park 11 days earlier on July 31st, 1991. The victim of that crime was 21-year-old Joel Larson. All right, so now I'm starting to see what's going on here. Yeah, when Don was telling me the story, they had started, he was investigating, like I told you. He told me he was looking at these sex parties, and he was told to put the kibosh on the investigation, shut it up, and turn all the info over to the chief, and he wasn't to pursue it. And that's when Don had quit the department. And then not too long after the guy had been, after the investigations that happened, all of a sudden this, like a week or two later, this Chenoweth had been killed on August 10th, 1991, and he was hanging around with this 19-year-old kid from my hometown, Coon Rapids, and they were both shot. Okay, this is interesting. I was able to find this story. This appeared in Star Tribune, August 13th, 1991. Chenoweth identified as man slain on beach. Police investigation focuses on hate crimes against gays. John Chenoweth, a former state senator and head of the Minneapolis City Pension Fund, was identified on Monday as a man killed during a weekend shooting at a beach frequented by gays. Police said the shooting, which left another man seriously wounded, was the kid from Coon Rapids, was related to the shooting death 2 weeks ago of Joel Larson, another gay man in Loring Park. So Joel Larson was killed in Loring Park, and then this senator was killed. Police would not describe the possible connection, but said they are investigating death as bias crimes against gays. That's what they were telling everybody, okay? They did know that eventually they were able to assume all three were related because they were able to determine that it was the same gun was used. But this is that they hadn't known that yet when this article was written. Certainly that's the assumption, said Police Chief John. Okay, so now we know who the chief is, John Locks. Okay, now my chief had told Don Heitland had told me his police chief told him to put the kibosh on the investigation of these sex parties that was being done by these politicians. Whether this is the motive or there are other motives, I'm looking at this as a hate crime, a bias crime. Yeah, that how convenient. No mention of anything else. So he was 48 years old, and they are not ruling out any possibilities, and they're focusing more on, apparently Chenoweth had a gay lifestyle, and some of his previous business dealings. Yeah. Because from what Don had told me, the guy that had killed him claimed when Don was talking, that he had gotten, that the person that did the shooting had gotten AIDS from being at this party, from a certain politician. I don't know if that is this Chenoweth or not, but this is the closest I could find to that story. He was a well-connected DFL state legislature, and he resigned as head of the city's pension fund last year. And then in the months that followed, his handling of personal and fund investments was questioned, and he was named in lawsuits. Okay. Gay bashing is only one possibility. So they were thinking there could be other things going on. Maybe he did some things with the pension fund. Maybe took money. I don't know. So we don't know. That's just what I'm guessing. The connection in the deaths of Chenoweth and Larson fueled concerns from members of the gay community that police are not doing enough to solve the slayings. And gay activists attended an afternoon news conference, and they also peppered Locks with questions. And they also called for a protest outside City Hall, in which they denounced inactivity in the cases and also called for putting openly gay police officers on the force. All right. Let's see. Chenoweth left the Senate in 1979 to become director of MRF. Word of his gay lifestyle followed him wherever he went, from the legislature to City Hall. He chose not to discuss it. And Yeah, so there we go. Chenoweth often threatened to quit, saying he could land a much higher paying job in the private sector. He earned more than $80,000 last year at Murph, but he had no known employment since he left Murph. And he complained that his job prospects were harmed by the charges that he unwisely invested the fund's money. Okay. So yeah, there's some things going on here with Chenoweth. So this is a story that I found on Crime Feed. Let's see. This is a picture of Joel Larson. He was apparently a kid from Iowa that moved to Minneapolis, and he was one of the. There was 3 people that were killed. He was the one that was killed at Loring Park, and I don't know what his relationship was with the person that killed him. If there was one, okay. The article is saying the guy just caught AIDS and he went on a mad shooting spree. Now, the story that Don Heitland had told me was that the killer was angry about all these sex parties that were going on with minors, and the fact that he was a part of that. He had been as a kid, he'd been molested by these guys, and he was angry that he caught AIDS and he was seeking revenge. So I don't know which story is true. I really don't. I mean, it's pretty clear that the articles, according to Star Trib and the paper, and even the police chief, this Chief Locks, everything's pointing that this was a hate crime, and they're making it a hate crime, and that's what everybody wants to believe. I don't think anyone wants to believe that there were sex parties going on by these politicians, and that's what prompted this person to, he wanted revenge. But let's read this story. An inspiring serial killer targeting gay community in Minneapolis, Minnesota put the city on edge after a series of shootings in the summer of 1991. On the evening of July 31st, police received reports of shots fired in Loring Park. Responding officers found the body of 21-year-old Joel Larson. He just moved to the area from Des Moines, Iowa. Witnesses recalled seeing the victim run and hearing him scream before he collapsed and died from a gunshot to the back. Investigators initially theorized Larson's murder was connected to a robbery and had a few clues to go on, except the bullet fragments recovered from the scene and a description of the shooter. Okay. So then on August 10th, around 5:30 a.m., another shooting rocked the city. And officers checked out reports of a person screaming in Riverside Park along the Mississippi River. And they found Cord Drassett. He was 19 years old, lying on a trail with 2 bullet wounds to his back. He survived the attack and was able to give police a description of the person who gunned him down. He was 5 foot 9 inch male. He had long hair and wore a baseball cap. The responders tended to Drassett, and officers went deeper into the park to look for the suspect, and then they discovered John Chenoweth, 48-year-old former state senator. He was shot twice in the chest and lying dead in a pool of blood. They sent the bullet victims collected from the second victim's body to ballistics, and then they speculated the 2 killings could be related. Okay, so 2 people were killed because Drassett survived. The kid from my hometown in Coon Rapids survived. The theory was confirmed and found that, the bullets matched. They were fired from the same .38 caliber gun. And then in February 1992, the case took a turn when several organizations received an anonymous 6-page letter referencing the slayings. Addressed to our dear gay friends, the note said, continued ignorance in regards to the murders which occurred in Minneapolis in your community last summer at last has provoked us to respond. victim's death letter read were no doubt slowing the spread of AIDS to the general population. The author only identified himself as from the AIDS Commission, which was eventually determined to be a fictitious group. But the letters, officials realized, contained very real details about the slayings only someone at the crime scene would know. Now, Don had told me that he was the one that told the police that he thought he knew who the killer was, because he had talked to this guy, and this guy apparently, had said that he had contacted AIDS from being at these parties with these politicians, and he wanted revenge. But none of that is in any of this story right here. So this is wild here. A short time later, the advocacy group Gay Lesbian Community Action Council received a chilling phone call from a man who said he was a member of the AIDS Commission and claimed to be involved in the killings. He wanted more deaths. He warned more deaths were to come. Yeah, this is when police. Don had told me that the police had started to think that maybe Don was the one that was being responsible for these killings, because Don was pissed off that they put the kibosh on his police investigation, and they wouldn't let him bust these politicians for the parties, and he had quit. And then, like a couple weeks later, these killings were going on, and so the police had thought maybe Don was the one that was running around doing this. But Don actually told him who the guy was. He thought it was this person right here. This police took J. Thomas Johnson. At that time, he was a 24-year-old host at Denny's restaurant, into custody for questioning. And an eyewitness to one of the murders picked him out of a lineup. And detectives found newspaper clips about the slayings in the murder suspect's rented room, as well as a wig, baseball cap, and a .38 caliber handgun in his car. A journal in his possession hinted at a possible motive for the crimes. My dream of committing homicides on a large scale and entering the ranks of the nation's most notorious serial killers, he wrote in an entry. Yeah, he was seeking revenge, no doubt about it. If those parties are true and that's how he got AIDS, and he got it from those politicians, he was planning, and then the police weren't doing anything about it, weren't going to put these guys away. I don't know. I don't know if it just, this could be really the real story. It could just be a hate crime and everything there. And Don, either I got it wrong when Don told me the story, or, because it was so many years ago and maybe I couldn't remember every detail in the story, or I got things out of order, or maybe out of context. I don't know. I really don't know. If there was a cover-up, man, shame on the police department. And, I just don't know why Don would have lied to me about that. And Don just never seemed like the kind of guy that would lie about stuff. He just didn't. Let's see. Ambition, which had grown as dormant as the AIDS virus now in my cells, were now reawakened. They had found a new sense of urgency. I fully intended to expedite a number of souls to the gates of heaven or the dungeons of hell. I wonder if these politicians were scared as hell when, if these parties were real, and that one guy got killed. If Chenoweth was actually, there as part of these parties, and then and then these other guys that were there too, and some of these other people started getting killed. And according to Don, these people were all at these parties, the people that got killed, but there's no evidence of that, and the police aren't saying that. This is just what Don told me. But I bet they were all shaking in their boots, trying to, until this guy got caught. He was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of attempted murder. He took the deal, admitted guilt to the murder charges, and the judge sentenced him to 2 concurrent life sentences plus 15 years for the attempted murder. He is incarcerated at the Minnesota Correctional Facility in Stillwater, and he's eligible for parole in 2032. So, that's what, 9 more years? In a written statement read at his 1992 sentencing, Chenoweth's parents told him, "You have committed the sin of sins when you decided who shall live and who shall die." Yeah, I don't know. Johnson grew up and was taught to hate gay people, so in a sense he was taught to hate himself. Well, so I don't know. I really don't know. This is the closest that I can get to the story that Don had told me. Some of the things that I told you in that story appear to not be correct. But I don't, because I had said it was a kid from Coon Rapids that had done the killing, and that doesn't appear to be the fact. It was a kid from Coon Rapids that got shot at and was injured because he was with Chenoweth at the beach. So I got that part wrong. So this story here, I wish I could get rid of that thing, that's the gift card thing there, get that out of there. So this is another article about Joel Larson. He was the kid from Iowa, Des Moines, Iowa, that got killed at Loring Park by that, what was that Jay Thomas? Who killed him? Yeah, Jay Thomas Johnson. Jay Thomas Johnson. He was 24 years old when he did the killing. This kid was 19 years old. Let's see what's going on here. Okay. Apparently, yeah, they had announced they had a suspect in custody when a man was caught robbing the saloon of one of Minneapolis's popular gay bars. Okay, so there's a part of the story I didn't catch from the other parts. That's maybe how they caught Jay Thomas. Apparently, Jay, he had killed these guys, and then 6 months later, he got caught trying to rob. Got caught trying to rob a gay bar. Yeah, this talks about, now this is the guy right here as he looks now. Okay, so apparently he's a black man. Yeah, interesting that the articles didn't mention his color or anything, but that's what they do nowadays in Minnesota. Not saying anything, but he was yeah, so it talks about his sinister plan to start wiping out gay people. Yeah, my dream of committing homicide on a large scale and entering ranks of the nation's most notorious serial killers. Where is Jay Thomas Johnson now? Well, he was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences. Isn't it interesting? He was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences, but he gets out on parole in 2032. So 9 more years he could be eligible for parole. That's wild. Now my story that I got was that he'd gotten AIDS from being at these parties, and he found out that the police weren't going to do anything about arresting these guys, and he went on a revenge spree. Basically, he wanted revenge because the police weren't going to do anything. He became a vigilante, and that's the story that I got from Don. So I don't know how true that is. Some of it matches up and some of it doesn't. So So this is John Locks. John Locks was the chief back in 1991 in the Minneapolis Police Department when Don Heitland had been working there as a detective. So this is the guy that Don had told me put the kibosh on his investigation, if that is true. So it took 3 tries for John to get hired as a Bloomington cop. He got rejected in the 1960s when he was a 21-year-old. Basically, some cop told him to come back when you grow up, because he was 5 feet 8 and 2 inches too short to meet the height requirements at that time. And then round 2 is in 1988 when he was a Minneapolis deputy chief and a finalist for Bloomington, but another cop got the job for Minneapolis. And then Locks became police chief in Minneapolis, and then a job which he retired in 1994 after 6 years. So basically he was a chief there for 6 years and he retired in 1994. So yeah, he definitely was the chief. He describes his last year in the Minneapolis job as hell. I can imagine, especially if what Don had said was true. And there was a cover-up of that situation, the parties or whatever. So yeah, so this basically, there's a story here where he talked about it was time of race riots and war protests, and yeah, and then he spent 40 years in police work, 27 with Minneapolis, and then he then 6 years as the Bloomington chief. So I've never regretted getting into law enforcement, he said. So, well, Don had told me he just was really upset at that chief for what he had done. But so I don't know how true the story is that Don told me, because Don told me the story 30 some years ago. It's obvious that I got a couple things wrong in the story, but some of the things I don't know how they could possibly line up, but then again they might not line up. So I guess I don't know. I don't really know. The only thing you could do is we have to pay a visit to the guy that's in jail, but how trustworthy is he, right? How trustworthy is that guy? Or find Don again. I don't know if Don's still alive. I tried to look for him. Apparently, he might still be alive, and he might be still living in Minnesota. Be interesting to hear him tell his story again. I don't know. So anyways, that's all I got for you. Sorry, this is a little bit kind of mashed together. I'm doing this video at like 2 in the morning. I got to take off in my semi truck, actually heading to Minneapolis myself. So all right, but that's all I got for you. Wisconsin Hugs.